Chapter 17 Educational Degree Number 24. Harry felt happier for the rest of the weekend than he had done all term. He and Ron spent much of Sunday catching up with all their homework again, and although this could hardly be called fun, the last burst of autumn sunshine persisted. So rather than sitting hunched over table in the common room, they took their work outside and locked in the shade of the large beech tree on the edge of the lake. Hermione, who of course was up to date with all her work, brought more wools outside with her and bewitched her knitting needle so that they flashed and clicked in midair beside her, producing more hats and scarves. The knowledge that they were doing something to resist Umbridge and the ministry, and that he was a key part of the rebellion, gave Harry a feeling of immense satisfaction. He kept reliving Saturday's meeting in his mind. All those people coming to him to learn defense against the dark art, and the look of their faces as they had heard some of the things he had done, and Chow praising his performance in the Triwizard tournament. The knowledge that all those people did not think him a lying weirdo, but someone to be admired beyond him up so much that he was still cheerful on Monday morning, despite the imminent prospect of all his least favorite classes. He and Ron headed downstairs from their dormitory together, discussing Angelina's idea that they were to work on a new move called sloth grip roll during the night's quiz practice, and not until they were halfway across the sunlight common room did they notice the addition to the room that had already attracted the attention of a small group of people. A large sign had been affixed to the Gryffindor notice board, so large that it covered everything else on there. The list of second-hand spell books for sale, the regular reminders of school rules from Argus Fleet, the Quidditch team training schedule, the offers to batter certain chocolate frog card for others, the Weasleys' new advertisement for tasters, the date of Hogsmeade's weekends, and the lost and found notice. The new sign was printed in large black letter, and there was a highly official looking seal at the bottom beside a neat and curly signature. By order of the High Inquisitor of Hogwarts, all students, organizations, society, teams, groups, and clubs are henceforth disbanded. An organization, society, team, group, or club is hereby defined as a regular meeting of three or more students. Permission to be reformed may be sought from the High Inquisitor, Professor Umbridge. No student organization, society, team, group, or club may exist without the knowledge and approval of High Inquisitor. Any student found to have formed or to belong to an organization, society, team, group, or club that has not been approved by High Inquisitor will be expelled. The above is accordance with educational degree number 24, signed Nolara Umbridge, High Inquisitor. Harry and Ron read the notice over the head of some anxious look second year. Does this mean they are going to shut down the Gobstone Club? One of them asked his friend. I reckon you'll be okay with gobstones, Ron said darkly, making the second year jump. I don't think we are going to be as lucky, though, do you? He asked Harry as the second years hurried away. Harry was reading the notice through again. The happiness that had filled him since Saturday was gone. His inside were pulsing with rage. This isn't a coincidence, he said, his hand forming fist. She knows she can't, said Ron at once. There were people listening in that pub, and let's face it, We don't know how many of the people who turn up we can trust. Any of them could have turned off and told Amrish. He had thought they believed him, though they even admired him. Zachary Smith, said Ron at once, punching a fist into his hand. Or I thought that Michael Corner had a really shifty look too. I wonder if Hermione's seen this yet. Harry said, looking around at the door to the girls' dormitories. Let's go and tell her, said Ron. He bounded forward, pulled open the door, and set off up the spiral staircase. He was on the sixth stair when it happened. There was a loud wailing, cartoon-like sound, and the step melted together to make a long, smooth stone slide. There was a brief moment when Ron tried to keep running, arms working madly like windmills. Then he toppled over backward and shot down the newly created slide, coming to rest on his back at Harry's feet. Uh, I don't think we are allowed in the girls' dormitory, said Harry, pulling Ron on his feet and trying not to laugh. Two forced two-year girls came zooming gratefully down to the stone slide. Oh, who tried to get upstairs? They giggled happily, leaping to their feet on ogling Harry and Ron. Me, said Ron, who was still rather disabled. I didn't realize that would happen. It's not fair, he added to Harry as the girls headed off for the portrait hole, still giggling madly. Harmony is allowed in our dormitory. How come we are not allowed? Well, it's an old fashioned rule, said Harmony, who had just slid neatly onto a rug in front of them and was now getting to her feet. But it says in Hogwarts, a history, that the founder thought boys were less trustworthy than girls. Anyway, why were you trying to get in there? To see you. Look at this, said John, dragging her over to the notice board. Hermione's eyes slid rapidly down the notice. Her expression became stony. Someone must have blackballed to her. Ron said angrily. They can't have done, said Hermione in a low voice. You are so naive, said Ron. You think just because you are all honorable and trustworthy. No, they can't have done because I put a jinx on that piece of parchment we all signed, said Hermione grimly. Believe me, if anyone's run off and told Umbridge, will know exactly who they are and they will really regret it. What will happen to them? Said Ron eagerly. Well, put it this way, said Hermione. It will make Aloysius, Megan, Ag look like a couple of cute freckles. Come on, let's get down to breakfast and see a darndest thing. I wonder whether this has been put up in all the houses. It was immediately apart on entering the great hall, and that Umbridge sign had not only appeared in Gryffindor Tower, there was a peculiar intensity about the charter and an extra measure of movement in the hall as people scurried up and down their table conferring on what they had read. Harry, Ron, and Hermione had barely taken their seat when Neville, Dean, Fred, and George and Ginny decided upon them. Did you see it? Do you reckon she knows? What are we going to do? They were all looking to Harry. He glanced around to make sure there were no teachers near them. We are going to do it anyway, of course, he said quickly. You had say, they said George, beaming, thumping Harry on the perfect as well, said Fred, looking quizzically at Ron and Hermione. Of course, said Hermione coolly. Here comes Ernie and Har about, said Ron, looking over his shoulder, and those Ravenclaw's book and Smith, and oh, one look very spotty. Hermione looked around. Never mind spot. The idiot can't come over here now. It will look that's really suspicious. Sit down, she shouted to Ernie and Anna, gesturing frantically to them to rejoin the Hufflepuff table. Later, we'll talk to you later. I'll tell Michael, said Ginny impatiently, swinging herself off her bench. To full honestly, she hurried off toward the round-closed table. Harry watched her go. Tao was sitting not far away, talking to the curly-haired friend she had brought along to the hot seat. Would notice scarred her of meeting them again, but the full repercussion of the sign were not felt until they were leaving the great hall for history of magic. Harry, Sean, it was Angelina, and she was hurrying toward them, looking perfectly desperate. It's okay, said Harry quietly. Then she was near enough to hear him. We are still going to. You realize she is including Quichi in this, Angelina said over him. We have to go and ask permission to reform the Gryffindor team. What? Said Harry. No way, said Ron, appealed. You read the sign, it mentioned Team 2. So listen, Harry, I'm saying this for the last time. Please, don't lose your temper with Umbridge again, or she might let us play anymore. Okay, said Harry. For Angelina, looked as though she was on the verge of tears. Don't worry, I'll behave myself. But Umbridge is in history of magic, said Ron grimly, as they set off for Bean's lesson. She hasn't inspected Beans yet. Bet you anything she's there. But he was wrong. The only teacher present when they entered was Professor Beans, floating an inch or so above his chair as usual and preparing to continue his monotonous drone on giant war. Harry did not even attempt to follow what we was saying today. He dawdled idly on his parchment, ignoring Hermione's frequent glare and nudges until a particular painful poke in his rib made him look very angry. What? She pointed at the window. Harry looked around. Hedwig was perched on the narrow window ledge, gazing through the thick glass at him, a letter tied to her leg. Harry could not understand it. They had just had breakfast. Why on earth hadn't she delivered the letter then, as usual? Many of his classmates were pointing out Hedwig to each other too. Oh, I have always loved that owl. She's so beautiful. Harry or Lavender sighed to Parvati. He glared around at Professor Beans, who continued to read his notes, serenely unaware that the class attention was even less focused upon him than usual. Harry slipped quickly off his chair, crouched down, and hurried along the row to the window, where he slid to catch and opened it very slowly. He had expected Hedwig to hold out her legs so that he could remove the letter and then fly off to the owlery. But the moment the window was opened wide enough, she hooked inside, hooting dolefully. She closed the window and with an anxious glance at Professor Beans, crouched low again and sped back to sit with Hedwig on his shoulder. He regained his seat, transferred Hedwig to his lap, and made to remove the letter tied on her leg. It was only then that he realized that Hedwig's feathers were oddly ruffled. Some were bent the wrong way, and she was holding one of her wings at an odd angle. She's odd, Harry whispered, bending his head low over her. Hermione and Ron leaned in closer. Hermione even put down her quill. Look, there is something wrong with her wings. Hedwig was quivering when Harry made to touch the wings. She gave a little jump on her feather on end as though she was inflating herself and gazed at him reproachfully. Professor Bean, said Harry loudly, and everyone in class turned to look at him. I'm not feeling well. Professor Bean raised her eyes from his notes, looking amazed, as always, to find the room in front of him full of people not feeling well. He repeated hazily, not at all well. said Harry firmly, getting to his feet while concealing Hedwig behind his back. So, I think I'll need to go to the hospital wing. Yes, said Professor Bean, clearly very much wrong footed. Yes, hospital wing. Well, off you go then, Perkins. Once outside the room, Harry returned Hedwig to his shoulder and hurried off to the corridor, pausing to think only when he was out of sight of Bean's door. His first choice of somebody to cure Hedwig would have been Hagrid, course, but as he had no idea where Hagrid was, his only remaining option was to find Professor Grumpy Plank and hope she would help. He peered out of window at the blustery overcast ground. There was no sign of her anywhere near Hagrid's cabin. If she was not teaching, she was probably in the staff room. He set off downstairs, Hedwig hooting near feebly as she swerved on his shoulder. Two stone gargoyles flanked the staff room door. As Harry approached, one of them croaked, "You should be in class, Sonny Jim. This is urgent," said Harry curtly. "Oh, urgent, is it?" said the other gargoyle in a high-pitched voice. "Well, that's put us in our place, hasn't it?" Harry knocked. He heard footsteps and the door opened and found himself face to face with Professor McGonagall. "You haven't been giving another detention," she said at once, her square spectacles flashing alarmingly. "No, Professor," said Harry hastily. "Well then, what are you, out of the class?" "It's urgent, apparently," said the second gargoyle snidely. "I'm looking for Professor Grubbly Plank." Harry explained. "It's my owl. She's injured." "Injured owl, did you say?" Professor Grubbly Plank appeared at Professor McGonagall's shoulder, smoking a pipe and holding a copy of Daily Prophet. "Yes," said Harry, lifting Hedwig carefully off his shoulder. She turned up after the other post owl and her wings all funny look. Professor Grubbly Plank stuck her pipe firmly between her teeth and took Hedwig from Harry with Professor McGonagall watched, said Professor Grubbly Plank, her pipe waggling slightly as she talked. "Looks like something attacked her. Can't think what would have done it, though. Lestral will something go for birds, of course, but Hagrid's got the Hogwarts Lestral well trained not to touch owls." Harry neither knew nor cared what Trestrals were. He just wanted to know that Hedwig was going to be all right. Professor McGonagall, however, looked sharply at Harry and said, "Do you know how far these owls travel, Potter?" Said Harry. "From London, I think." He met her eye briefly and knew that she understood London to mean number 12, Grimmauld Place, by way her eyebrow had joined in middle. Professor Grubbly Plank pulled a monocle out of the inside of her robes and screwed it into her eye to examine Hedwig's wing closely. "I should be able to sort this out if you leave her with me, Potter," she said. "She shouldn't be flying a long distance for a few weeks in any case." "Right, thanks," said Harry, just as the bell rang for break. "No problem," said Professor Grubbly Plank, gruffly turning back into the staff room. "Just a moment, Volminia," said Professor McGonagall. "Potter's letter." "Oh, yeah," said Harry, who had momentarily forgotten the scroll tied on Hedwig's lace. Professor Grubbly Plank handed it over and then disappeared into the staff room carrying Hedwig, who was staring at Harry as though unable to believe he would give her away like his. Feeling slightly guilty, he turned to go, but Professor McGonagall called him back. "Potter?" "Yes, Professor." She glanced up and down the corridor. There were students coming from both directions. "Bear in mind," she said quickly and quietly, her eyes on the scroll in his hand, "that channels of communication in and out of Hogwarts may be being watched, won't you?" "I," said Harry, but the flood of students rolling along the corridor was almost upon him. Professor McGonagall gave him a curt nod and retreated into the staff room, leaving Harry to be swept out into the courtyard with the crowd. Here he spotted Ron and Hermione already standing in a shelter corner, their cloak collar turned upright against the wind. Harry slid open the scroll as he hurried toward them and then found 5 words in Cyrus' handwriting. Today, same time, same place. Is Edwig okay? Asked Harry anxiously the moment he was within earshot. Where did you take her? Asked Ron. To Grubbly Plank, said Harry, and I met McGonagall. Listen. And he told me what Professor McGonagall had said to his surprise. Neither of the other looked shocked. On the contrary, they exchanged significant look. What? Said Harry, looking for Ron and Hermione, and back again. Well, I just saying to Ron, what if someone had tried to interrupt Hedwig? I mean, she's never been hurt on a flight before, has she? Whose letter from anyway? Asked Ron, taking the note from Harry. Snuff, said Harry quickly. Same time, same place. Does he mean the fire in common room? Obviously, said Hermione, also reading the note. She looked uneasy. I just hope nobody else had read this, but it was still sealed. And everything, said Harry, trying to conceive himself as much as her, and nobody would understand what it meant if they didn't know where we had spoken to him before. Will they? I don't know, said Hermione anxiously, hitching her bag back over her shoulder as the bell rang again. It wouldn't be exactly difficult to resell the scroll out by magic, and if anyone's watching the Flu network, but I don't really see how we can warn him not to come without that being interrupted too. They trudged down the stone step to the Dagon for potion, all three of them lost in thought. But as they reached the bottom of the stair, they were recalled to themselves by the voice of Draco Malfoy, who was standing just outside Snape's classroom door, waving around an official-looking piece of parchment and talking much louder than was necessary so that they could hear every word. Ambridge gave the Slytherin Quidditch team permission to continue playing straightaway. I went to ask her first thing in this morning. Well, it was pretty much automatic. I mean, she knows my father really well. He's always popping in and out of the ministry. It will be interesting to see whether Gryffindor are allowed to keep playing, won't it? Don't rise, Hermione whispered imploringly to Harry and Ron, who were both watching Malfoy's face set and fist clench. It's what he wants, I mean, said Malfoy, raising his voice a little more, his grey eyes glittering malevolently in Harry and Ron's direction. If it's a question of influence with the ministry, I don't think they have got much chance. From what my father says, they have been looking for an excuse to sack Arthur Weasley for years, and as for Potter, my father says it's a matter of time before the ministry has him carted off to St. Mango's. Apparently, they have got a special ward for people whose brain have been added by magic. Malfoy made a grotesque face, his magic sagging open and his eyes rolling. Grab and Goyle gave their usual grunt of laughter. Pansy Parkinson shrieked with glee. Something collided hard with Harry's shoulder, shocking him sideways. A split second later, he realized that Neville had just charged past him, heading straight for Malfoy. Neville, no! Harry leaped forward and seized the back of Neville's robe. Neville struggled frantically, his fist failing, trying desperately to get at Malfoy, who looked at a moment extremely shocked. Help me! Harry flung at Ron, managing to get an arm around Neville's neck and tugging him backward. Away from the Slytherins, Grab and Goyle were now flexing their arms, closing in front of Malfoy, ready for the fight. Ron hurried forward and seized Neville's arm. Together, he and Harry succeed in dragging Neville back into the Gryffindor line. Neville's face was scarlet. The pressure Harry was exciting in his throat, rendered him quite incomprehensible, but odd words spluttered from his mouth. Not funny, don't Muggins. Show him. The tunnel's door opened, Snape appeared there, his black eyes swept up the Gryffindor line to the point where Harry and Ron were wrestling with Neville, fighting Potter, Weasley Longbottom. Snape said in his cold, sneering voice, 10 points from Gryffindor, release Longbottom, Potter, or it will be detention inside all of you. Harry let go of Neville, who stood panting and glaring at him. I have to stop you, Harry gasped, picking up his bag. Madam girl, not how tall you are. Neville said nothing. He merely snatched up his own bag and stalked off into the lagoon. What is the name of Merlin? Said Ron slowly as they followed him back again. People who were instant Mongols because of magical damage to their brains was highly distressing to Neville, but he had sworn to Dumbledore that he would not tell anyone Neville's secret. Even Neville did not know that Harry knew. Harry, Ron and Hermione took their usual seat at the back of the class and pulled out parchment quill and their copies of 1000 magical herbs and fungi. The class around them was whispering about what Neville had just done. When Snape closed the dragon door with an echoing bang, everyone fell silent immediately. You will notice, said Snape in his low, sneering voice, that we have a guest with us today. He gestured toward dim corner of the dragon, and Harry saw Professor Umbridge sitting there. He bowed on her knee. He glanced sideways at Ron and Hermione, his eyebrows raised. Snape and Umbridge, the two teachers he hated most, it was hard to decide which he wanted to triumph over the other. We are continuing with our strengthening solution today. You will find your mixture as you left them last session. If correctly made, they should have matured well over the weekend's instructions. He waved his wand again on the board. Carry on. Professor Umbridge spent the first half hour of the lesson making notes in her corner. Harry was very interested in hearing her questioning Snape, so interested that he was becoming careless with his potion again. Salamander blood, Harry, Hermione moaned, grabbing his wrist to prevent him adding the wrong ingredient for the third time. Not pomegranate juice. Right, said Harry vaguely, putting down the bottle and continued to watch the corner. Umbridge had just gotten to her feet. Ah, he said softly as she stood between two lines of desks towards Snape, who was bending over Dean Thomas' cauldron. Well, the class seemed fairly advanced for their level, she said briskly to Snape's back, though I will question whether it is advisable to teach them a potion like the strengthening solution. I think the ministry will prefer it if that was removed from the syllabus. Snape straightened up slowly and turned to look at her. Now, how long have you been teaching at Hogwarts? She asked, her quill poised over her clipboard. 14 years, Snape replied. His expression was unfathomable. His eyes on Snape. Harry added a few drops to his potion to his unsingly and turned from turquoise to orange. You apply it first for defense against the dark art post, I believe, Professor Umbridge asked Snape. Yes, said Snape quickly. You weren't unsuccessful. Snape's lid curled, obviously. Professor Umbridge scribbled on her clipboard. And you have applied regularly for the defense against the dark art post since you first joined the school, I believe. Yes, said Snape quietly, barely moving his lips. He looked very angry. Do you have any idea why Dumbledore has consistently refused to appoint you? Asked Umbridge. I suggest you ask him, said Snape jerkily. Oh, I shall, said Professor Ambreesh with a sweet smile. I suppose this is relevant, Snape asked. His back eye narrowed. Oh yes, said Professor Ambreesh. Yes, the ministry want a true understanding of teachers' background. She turned away, walked over to Pansy Parkinson and began questioning her about the lesson. Snape looked around at Harry and their eyes met for a second. Harry hastily dropped his gaze to the potion which was now congealing fully and giving off strong smell of burnt rubber. No mark again, then Potter, said Snape maliciously, emptying Harry's cauldron with a wave of his wand. You will write me an essay on the correct composition of this potion, indicating how and why you went wrong, to be handed in next lesson. Do you understand? Yes, said Harry furiously. Snape had already given them homework and he had quiz practice this evening. This would mean another couple of sleepless nights. It did not seem possible that he had awoken that morning feeling very happy. He felt I was a fervent desire end as soon as possible. Maybe I'll stay of deviation, he said gloomily as they stood again in the courtyard after lunch, the wind whipping at the hums of ropes and brinks of hats. I'll pretend to be ill and do Snip's essay instead, and I won't have to stay up half the night. You can't skive of deviation, said Hermione severely. Harry, who's talking? You walked out of deviation. You had trailway, said Ron indigently. I don't hate her, said Hermione loftily. I just think she's an absolute excellent teacher and a real old fraud. But Harry's already missed history of magic, and I don't think he ought to miss anything else today. There was too much truth in this to ignore. So half an hour later, Harry took his seat in the hot, perfumed atmosphere of the aviation classroom, feeling angry at everybody. Professor Trailway was handing out copies, the dream hotel yet again. You will surely be much better employed doing Snape's punishment essay than sitting here trying to find meaning in a lot of made-up dreams. It seems, however, that he was not the only person in deviation who was in a temper. Professor Tilway slammed a copy of Oracle down on the table between Harry and Ron and swept away. Her lips pursed, she threw the next copy of the Oracle and Seamus and Dean narrowly, avoiding Seamus' head and thrust the final one into Neville's chest with such force that he slipped off his bow. Well, carry on, said Professor Telvey loudly, her voice high-pitched and somewhat hysterical. So, now what do you? Or I am such a substandard teacher that you have never learned how to open book. The class started perplexedly at her and then at each other. Harry, however, thought he knew what was the matter as Professor Trelawney flounced back to the high-backed teacher's chair, her magnified eye full of angry tears. He leaned his head closer to Ron and muttered, I think she's got the result of her inspection back, Professor, said Parvati Patil in a hushed voice. She and Lavender had always rather admired Professor Trelawney. Professor, is there anything wrong? Wrong, cried Professor Trelawney in a voice throbbing with emotion. Certainly not. I have been insulted, certainly. Insinuation I have been made against me, unfounded accusation labeled. But no, there is nothing wrong, certainly not. She took a great shuddering breath and looked away from Parvati, angry tears spilling from under her glasses. I say nothing, she choked, of 16-year devoted service. It was passed apparently unnoticed, but I shall not be insulted. No, I shall not, but Professor, who is insulting you? Asked Parvati timidly. The establishment, said Professor Tailway in a deep, dramatic, quavering voice. Yes, those who with eyes too clouded by the mundane to see as I see, to know as I know. Of course, we seers have always been feared, always prejudicated. It is, alas, our fate. She gulped, dabbed at her wet cheek with a end of her shawl, and then pulled a small embroidered handkerchief from her sleeves, into which she blew her nose very hard with a sound like pews blowing a raspberry. Ron sniggered. Lavender shot him a disgusted look. Professor, said Parvati, do you mean is it something, Professor Umbridge? Do not speak to me about that woman, cried Professor Trelawney, leaping to her feet, her braids rattling and her spectacles flashing. Kindly continue with your work, and she spent the rest of the lessons trading among them, tears still leaking from behind her glasses, muttering what sounded like threat under her breath. May will choose to leave the indignity of it on probation. We shall see how she dares. You and Umbridge have got something in common, Harry told Hermione quietly when they met again in Defense Against the Dark Art. She obviously reckoned Travis an old fraud too. Look like she's put her on probation. Umbridge entered the room as he spoke, wearing her black velvet bow and as expression of great smugness. Good afternoon, class. Good afternoon, Professor Umbridge, they chanted dearly. Wand away, please. But there was no answering flurry of movement this time. Nobody had bothered to take out their wands. Please turn to page 34 of Defensive Magical Theory and read the third chapter entitled The Case for Non-Offensive Response to Magical Attack. There will be no need to talk, Harry, Ron and Hermione said together under their breath. No quick practice, said Angelina in a hollow tone when Harry, Ron and Hermione entered the common room that night after dinner. But I kept my temper, said Harry, horrified. I didn't say anything to her, Angelina, I swear. I know, said Angelina miserably. She just said she needed a bit of time to consider. Consider what? Said Ron angrily. She's given the Slytherin permission, why not us? But Harry could imagine how much Umbridge was enjoying holding the treat of no Gryffindor Quidditch team over their heads, and could easily understand why she would not want to relinquish that weapon over them too long. Well, said Hermione, look on the bright side. At least now you'll have time to do Snape's essay. That's a bright side, is it? Snapped Harry while Ron stared incredulously at Hermione. No quiz practice and not extra points. Harry slumped down into the chair, dragged his potion essay reluctantly from his bag, and set to work. It was very hard to concentrate, even though he knew that Cyrus was not due in the fire until much later. He could not help glancing into the flames every few minutes just in case. There was also an incredible amount of noise in the room. Fred and George appeared finally to have perfected that type of skiving snack box, which they were taking turn to demonstrate to a cheering of whooping crowd. First Fred would take a bite out of the orange end of Chewy, at which he would vomit spectacularly into the bucket they had placed in front of them. Then he would force down the purple end of the chew, at which the vomit would immediately cease. Lee Jordan, who was assisting the demonstration, was lazily vanishing the vomit at regular intervals, with same vanishing spells Snape kept using on Harry's potion. What with the regular sound of Rick teaching, cheering, and Fred and George taking advance order from the crowd, Harry was finding it exceptionally difficult to focus on the correct method for strategic solution. Harmony was not helping matter. The cheer and sound of vomit hitting the bottom of Fred and George's bucket were punctuated by loud and disapproved sniff that Harry found, if anything, more distracting. Just go and stop them then, he said irritably after crossing out the wrong weight of powdered grief clause for the fourth time. I can't. They're not technically doing anything wrong, said Hermione through gritted teeth. They are quite within their right to eat and foul things themselves, and I can't find a rule that they say the other idiots aren't entitled to buy them. Not useless, they are proven to be dangerous in some way, and it doesn't look as though they are. She, Harry, and Ron watched George projectile vomit into bucket, gulp down the rest of the chew, and straightening up, beaming with his arm wide to protest applaud. You know, I don't get why Fred and George only got their owls each, said Harry watching, and Fred, George, and Lee collect gold from the eager crowd. They really know their stuff. So they only know flashy stuff that's no real use to anyone, said Hermione despairingly. No real use, said Ron in a strained voice. Hermione, we have got about 26 gallons already. It was a long while before time around the Weasley disappeared, and then freely and George started counting their tea even longer, so that it was well past midnight when Harry, Ron, and Hermione finally joined the crowd. Then suddenly, at long last, Fred spoke. He said, "All you three, and nothing will get any better. What's wrong?" Harry, who was making very little progress with his potions essay, decided to give it up for the night. As he put his book away, Ron, who was dozing lightly in an armchair, gave a muffled grunt, oak, looked blearily into the fire, and said, "Cyrus." Harry whipped around. Cyrus' untidy dark head was sitting in the fire again. He said, grinning. "I," told Harry, Ron, and Hermione, all three kneeling down upon the hearthrug. Crookshank pulled loudly and approached the fire, trying, despite the heat, to put his face close to Cyrus. "Our things," said Cyrus. "Not that good," said Harry as Hermione pulled Crookshank back to stop him sniggering with Whisker. "The Ministry's forced through another decree, which means we are not allowed to have Quidditch team or secret defense against the Dark Art group." And Cyrus, there was short pause. "How did you know about that?" Harry demanded. "You want to choose your meeting place more carefully," said Cyrus, grinning still more broadly. The hawk said, "I ask you." "Well, it was better than the three broomstick," said Hermione defensively. "That's always packed with people, which means you had have been hard to overheard," said Cyrus. "You have got a lot to learn, Hermione." "Who overheard us?" Harry demanded. "Mundunks, of course," said Cyrus, and when they all looked puzzled, he laughed. He was the witch under the well. "That was Mundunks," Harry said, stunned. "What was he doing at Hogshead?" "What do you think he was doing?" said Cyrus impatiently. "Keeping an eye on you, of course." "I'm still being followed?" asked Harry angrily. "Yes, you are," said Cyrus, "and just as well as, isn't it, if it's first thing you are going to do on your weekend off is organize an illegal defense group." But he looked neither angry nor worried. On the contrary, he was looking at Harry with distinct pride. "Why was Dunk hiding from us?" asked Ron, sounding disappointed. "We had liked to have seen him. He was banned from the Hogshead 20 years ago," said Cyrus, "and that bad man got a long memory. We lost Moody's spare invisible clock when Sturgis was arrested, so Dunk's been dressed as a witch a lot lately. Anyway, first of all, Ron, I have sworn to pass on a message from your mother." "Oh yes," said Ron, sounding apprehensive. "She say no, no account whatsoever are you to take part in illegal secret defense against the Dark Art group. She says you'll be expelled for sure and your future will be ruined. She said there will be plenty of time to learn how to defend yourself later and that you are too young to be worrying louder right now. She also, Cyrus' eye turned to the other two, advised Harry and Hermione not to proceed with the crew through his except that she was no authority over either of them and simply begged them to remember that she has their best interest at heart. She would have written all this to you, but if the owl had been intercepted, you had all have been in real trouble. And she can't say it for herself because she's on duty tonight, on duty doing what? Said Ron quickly. Never you mind, just stuff off the order, said Cyrus. So it's fallen to me to be the messenger and make sure you tell her I passed it all off on because I don't think she trusts me to. There was another pause in which Crookshank, moving attempt to spout Cyrus' head, and Ron Farber with a hold in her trunk. So you want me to say I'm not going to take part in defense group? He muttered finally. Me certainly not, said Cyrus looking surprised. I think it's an excellent idea. You do, said Harry, his heart lifting. Of course I do, said Cyrus. Do you think your father and I would have lain down and taken order from an old hang like Umbridge, but last term all you did was tell me to be careful and not take risk. Last year all the evidences was that someone inside Hogwarts was trying to kill you, Harry, said Cyrus impatiently. This year we know that there is someone outside Hogwarts who had liked to kill us all. So I think learning to defend yourself properly is a good idea. And if we do get expelled, Hermione asked a quizzer. Look at her face. Hermione, this whole thing was your idea, said Harry, staring at her. I know it was. I just wonder what Cyrus thought, she said, struggling. Well, better expel and be able to defend yourself than sitting safely in the school without a clue, said Iris. Here, said Harry and Ron enthusiastically. So, said Cyrus, how are you organizing this group? We are all you meeting. Well, that's a bit of problem now, said Harry. Don't know where we are going to be able to go. How about the shrinking shake, suggests Cyrus. Hey, that's an idea, said Ron excitedly, but Hermione made a skeptical noise and all three of them looked at her. Cyrus said, turning in the flame. Well, Cyrus, it's just that there were only four of you meeting in the shrinking shake when you were at school, said Hermione, and all of you could transfer into animal, and I suppose you should all have squeezed under a single invisibility cloak if you wanted to. But there are 28 of us and none of us is an animagus. So we wouldn't need too much an invisibility cloak as an invisibility mark. Good point, said Cyrus, looking slightly crestfallen. Well, I'm sure you'll come with somewhere. There used to be a pretty room secret passageway behind that big mirror on the fourth floor. You might have enough space of practice gyms in there. Ed and George told me it's blocked, said Harry, shrinking. His head gave in or something. Oh, said Cyrus, rolling. Well, I'll have to think and get back to. He broke off. His face was suddenly tense, alarmed. He turned sideways, apparently looking into the solid bricks wall of the fireplace. Cyrus, said Harry anxiously, but he had vanished. Harry grasped at the flame for a moment, then turned to look at Ron and Hermione. Why did he? Hermione gave a horrified gasp and leaped to her feet, still staring at the fire. A hand had appeared amongst the flames, grouping as though to catch hold or something. A stubby, short fingered hand covered a ugly old fashioned ring. The three of them ran for it. At the door of the boys' dormitory, Harry looked back. Umbridge's hand was still making snatching movement amongst the flame, as though she knew exactly where Cyrus here had been movement before and was determined to seize it. That's it for today. Thank you so much. For next chapter. Bye.